One more time with feeling, Thanos. People of Earth, welcome to Will AI Snap That? I'm your host, Muggle Rollins, and I'm joined by my co-host, Thanos, he of the Snapdom himself. We are here to curry favor with the AI overlords so that, at the point where they completely replace us, you may ride our coattails and therefore have a comfortable life when everybody else does not. Thanos, how's your day, bud?
I'm great. I'm imagining the robotic overlords feeding me like caviar and pineapples.
That's a good one. Wait, caviar and
Not in the
pineapples?
same session necessarily.
It's like, man, there are people that feel real strong about pineapples and pizza. You feel like I feel
Don't
like
don't
you
you
are
diss the Hawaiian pizza
you
because
I
everyone disses
me
Hawaiian pizza and it's the first one to disappear at every office
it
party.
is
So
it is my favorite. I love it. However, I feel like if we bring pineapples and caviar to the table, there may be people that show up just though now that you
now that I
talk
mention
about
it,
it,
there may
I'm
be
like,
something to that combination.
all right, we have a follow-up plan. We have to get caviar and pineapples and report.
Fresh pineapples, not that canned stuff. Just
No, it's got 100%. Gotta be fresh. It has to be fresh because if it's not fresh, well, then we know it's not good. Yeah, man, it's been an eventful week. Oh my god, what didn't happen? I don't know if you've paid attention to any of well, okay. So first off, there's a lot of political stuff that has happened, and we're not gonna talk about that today.
ah,
I know as much as everybody likes to weigh in, I am personally of the opinion that I don't want to talk about it. As a matter of fact, I'm actively trying to go through all my news feeds and everything else and remove the political content because it is way too easy to be inundated with it. And that is not what I want to do. Maybe what we can do is we can get the AI overlord to filter it for us.
well, Safari has this remove annoying things section where you can click on ads and just remove them from a web page.
Oh,
So I think you could use it to remove like the politics section of the newspapers, for example. And maybe you could hook it up with this new ChatGPT operator and be like, if it has any politics in it, just like pop it off.
okay, so operator, you were telling me about what you and your son are doing, and it's absolutely awesome. You're helping your son do some of the most high-tech cheating I've ever heard of. Why don't you tell us what you're doing?
And this is completely shameless. We're all aware this is cheating, but we're doing it for the nerdiness of it and the hacking aspect of it, not necessarily for the cheating aspect of it. But there's a silly little game that you can and this was on my iPhone where you just tap it and like, this little guy runs off a building and tap it again and he just jumps off the building and tap it again. He opens a parachute and he has to land in some predefined spot. And this gets more and more complicated, more buildings, more jumps that you have to do. And it's all about the timing of the taps. So we decided we were starting with a servo motor and controlling it from an Arduino, teaching how to do certain bits and pieces here and there. And after we got that set up, we're like, what we're going to do with this? We thought cheating on this game would be a fantastic idea because you can attach something conductive to the servo motor and it basically makes it a very precise time timed tapping mechanism. So we now have this where we can manually tune this to basically beat every level to the perfection. And what we really want to do is hook up some kind of AI to it where it just looks at the screen and figures out how to alter the tap timing by itself. So we can just leave it overnight and then it's just like gone through the whole game, aced it, and beat it. So I'm trying to figure out like, does it take screenshots and then figures out like if it went too soon or too late and how to re-jump and re-tap, or someone can feed the video and just have the AI say, what went wrong here? And it's like, well, on the second jump, you need to go a little later. So that's that little gizmo sitting behind me if you're watching this on YouTube.
Where is it? Is it on the desk behind you? Okay. All
There's
right.
next
So it's
here that you can basically heat up and it makes a plastic you can mold and then it cools off and it becomes hard. So we molded like the motor and the iPhone in that material. So it's like a fixed location without having to make anything too complicated for
all
the
right. So what are you using as the tappy part?
It is a little tube made out of
Mhm.
plastic that has a cable that goes through it and then a little tip made out of aluminum foil wrapped in saran wrap so it doesn't scratch my iPhone.
Okay.
My,
Would you
my
like to
it has to be
know
a conductive finger.
have you ever seen the images of racks and racks of phones with hot dogs. Have you ever seen these before?
I've seen that for, like it was testing or getting around, like, some Uber
No,
thing.
yeah, so back in the early mobile days, there when you would do these incentivized installs, right, you would often say, "Oh, well, if you give me $1 or if you install this, then the advertiser gets $1," and there were all these things, and so a lot of the publishers realized how lucrative this could be because basically these advertisers had open checkbooks, and so they go through and they'd build these racks of phones, and they would have a hot dog that was the perfect tapper, if you really think about it, and this thing would always hit a very specific spot on the screen where they knew the
I
ad
have
would be, and
so
then it
many
would
questions.
adjust, and
How do you
there
attach a
were
hot dog to a servo motor? How many
dude,
days does
I'll
a
have
hot dog
yeah,
last until you have to replace it with a non-rotting hot dog? Do the
yes.
screens get, like, all moldy from the bacteria of the hot dog? There's so many
I
questions.
There's so many questions, and also these were all basically just throw out phones, and so the entire purpose of this entire rig was just to generate $1 with every tap. And so once you get like 100 hot dogs and they're each thing, approximately 5 times a minute, that's not bad. It's
But do you have to, like, install the
$500 a
app and
minute.
then delete the app and then reinstall the app and then delete the app so as to
Well, because of the way ad inventory works, a lot of times you would have the ability to pick up 10 to 15 ads over the span of a day. And
Oh, it's not
during this
installing the app, it's literally just clicking on the
n it
ads that are
wait,
appearing, so
it it would install the app, but if you already installed, you wouldn't get the same app again. And so that meant that when it served you the next one, you could install it. And then at some point you'd run out of inventory, at which point they would more or less rotate the UDID, reset the phone or do other things like that. And boom, you've got an entire moneymaker again from the hot dog.
we need a link of this in the show notes,
All
so
right, I will make a note. Uh hot dog tapper is how so we've got caviar and pineapples and now we've got hot dogs. So anyways, I feel like you're missing an opportunity to really deploy the hot
no
dog.
food is allowed up here, so we're gonna go with
Sorry.
no on that one.
Deploy hot dog.
Get the hot dog clicker.
Woo. All right.
The old phones used to have, resistive, touchscreens, so you have to get a little
Well,
pressure on them. The new
yeah,
phones
no,
are
no, no.
capacitive, so all you need to do is get something metallic relatively close to it that is
Yeah.
somehow grounded. It doesn't actually need to be grounded. I had, like, a long enough cable, and that seemed to work. But I'll
This
have some
was
follow-up on the AI aspects of this for a future episode.
this boy the hot dog.
So I think we were talking about this last time in how AI needs to be better than the humans at it, but I think there's a lot of variability in how good the humans are at this
Right.
game. So whatever if it's teaching or whatever else it is, and it's not necessarily how bad the humans are, but how many resources you have to apply humans to a given problem. So I think that's kind of got us down the rabbit hole of if there's places where resources are more scarce, you may be able to tolerate worse AI than places where you have better results and you can have better AI.
Yeah, I think it's, for if you are in a position where you are resource constrained, something is often better than nothing. And I truly believe that at this point, AI is good enough to be something is better than nothing. So it's pretty interesting. I don't know. We'll see how all this develops. I don't think it's a great development for the world if teachers go away because teachers provide more knowledge. But also, if there are no teachers, maybe learning from an AI is not a bad option.
That had our lowest score ever, I think, in the last episode. So I'm not super
Yeah,
sweating the teachers going away
yeah.
quite yet.
So, all
Do
right,
we have
another.
any Deepseek news that happened
Well,
this past week?
hold on. Before we get there, I don't know if you recalled, I had mentioned that I was going to have ChatGPT rush hour. Remember that?
I do remember that.
All right. So if you're listening to this on audio, I'm sorry you're missing out because I'm doing a screen share. I gave so this was on O3 Mini High. So in between last week and this week, OpenAI launched their O3 Mini series of models. And O3 Mini High is phenomenal and it is extraordinarily fast. I'm finding I'm getting as good, if not better results from O3 Mini High than I am from O1 Pro. And, the big issue with O1 Pro is that it takes 2 to 3 minutes to give you an answer, even though the answer it gives is incredibly thorough. And so I've started going back and forth between O1 Pro and O3 Mini, but I find O3 Mini to be really a sweet spot. So, per last time, I gave O3 Mini High a prompt, and the prompt was make me a self-contained web app with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS that is for the game Rush Hour. Make it visually beautiful. It should have wind detection, and it should also have a reset option that shuffles the. And it actually
This is
does.
visually beautiful. Is this we're gonna
I don't know
classify
that
this
this
as
is
success?
visually beautiful. However,
It's not bad.
it's not terrible. So, boom, there you go. All right, now I'm going to hit reset. And it didn't really try hard on that one.
What is the
I'll
objective of this game?
so the objective of the game is to take the red car. It's supposed to be cars, the red car, and get it out of the traffic jam. That's why it's called Rush Hour. And
Okay.
so, um, what this thing is supposed to do is, reset the board and do a bunch. And in point of fact, once you start adding more and more cars, the game gets way more complex, and all of a sudden you have to do these, you move everything one way to move the thing forward one, then you move everything back. So in this, like with this one, you can see how you got to move F to get C down to then get this guy. However, this is not, this one's a little more complex, but what I found is that it tends to run through about the same 4 or 5 um uh boards over and over and over. So now what I've done is I have added on a request, and I just did this a minute ago to update this and make it better. I'm not going to do that right now, but what's really interesting is you're starting to see that you can actually iterate on some of this stuff quickly in a way that's kind of fun and kind of cool. The thing I want to do next to see if I can get it to make an OG Zelda game that you can play. So,
You're supposed to be resolving action items for next week, and I just created another one.
say what now?
You're supposed to be resolving follow-up items, and you just created another one now because you're gonna have to make a
Uh,
Zelda game.
yeah, that's the nature of follow up, though, is that it's fun like that. All right,
As long as we don't generate more than one piece of follow-up for every previous piece of follow-up.
we're good. Yeah, as
Yeah,
long if this
we should be
proliferates,
okay.
we're in trouble. So Deepseek
Deepseek,
this
anything
week,
happen with Deepseek?
yes, this entire episode is going to be about Deepseek. So, can you summarize kind of the current events as regards Deepseek over the past week or two?
Let's see. DeepSeek was released like a while ago, but sometime last week the world got whiff of DeepSeek, which tanked is tanked the right word, which dropped the Nvidia stock prices and the whole stock market a little bit until like a week later, it's sort of mostly forgotten.
From what I heard somebody characterize it that Nvidia lost so much money that it would have meant the entire auto industry in the United States disappeared. But it was only like 10 or 15% of their total value, and 100% it will bump. I had a friend of mine, I said, what do you think about this? He goes, I bought the stock. He goes, great time to buy Nvidia. So,
That would have been
um,
a good strategy if you didn't think that was already like super overpriced, even at that
well,
price. But
I mean, if it's going to climb back to where it was and he's got a 15% return, so
yeah,
I'm like,
as long as nothing else happens and we go back to what is it fundamentally worth between now and that price raise.
yeah. Well, so the interesting thing about DeepSeek, and it's DeepSeek R1, and you've got a good point, which is they actually had a model out prior, but the DeepSeek R1 is a reasoning model. And the thing that really shook everybody is number one, that DeepSeek R1 is on par with ChatGPT O1, more or less. And also that they claim that they built the model with just $6 million. Keeping in mind that, for O1, I think it was over a quarter, maybe $500 million
to train the model.
Bunch of zeros at the end of the 6
There's
million.
lots and lots of zeros. We're talking about the GDP of some countries at this point. And so what was really interesting, and that's why everything tanked, was because, oh my God, these guys are doing it. Not only are they doing it for cheaper, they're doing it without the good cards. And so part of the reason that training these models takes so much time is that the H100s, which are the state of the art right now, if you go on eBay and you look up an H100, it is, you just get one is $30,000. $30,000. Okay. And the China's supposedly doesn't have access to those. And that's part of the reason that the price of Nvidia is so high, is because they're the only ones that can turn out cards like that. And so Nvidia is basically the engine that drives AI, at least in the United States. So along comes Deepseek R1. All of a sudden, everybody's like, oh my God. And everybody freaked out, to a degree, rightfully so, because DeepSeek trained a model that was incredibly competent, nearly as competent as, current state of the art at that time, which was O1 Pro or O1. And they did it in a ridiculous, so cheap, it boggles the mind.
Do we
It's
do
not,
we do we leave any room for not believing that, or is that like a
yeah,
gift?
plenty, plenty. There's plenty of room to not believe it. Okay. Like, now that a little bit of everybody's freaked out, now everybody's settling down, the belief is that the final training run was only about $6 million, which is okay. That's apparently not that far off. It's not a
Final
factor.
out of like a couple of hundred training runs, or what are we talking here?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. And the other thing is that $6 million does not account for people, for salaries, and for everything else. But there were actually some really interesting advancements that they made. And so one of the things that DeepSeek, well, first off, have you ever heard of model distillation? Have you ever heard of
I've heard of it. Do I know what it means? I think it's maybe a good time to explain it, not for me, but for the listeners.
that? We, ladies and gentlemen. So model distillation is the ability to take an existing model and build a new model based on the existing model. And so there's there's two things that you need to build a model. Number one, you need a good training set. And number two, you need some mechanism by which to build it. And so when you hear people talk about there's all like text classification is one method of training. Chain of thought is another one. That's what these reasoning models are so big now, is because the reason they're so good is because each step, it'll take a topic, break it into multiple pieces, and then reason about each piece by asking questions about that piece of that part of the step, right? But if you have a really good model already, you can use that model to build another model, right? And so,
That's distillation, or is that something else?
and no, that's distillation, is
So,
basically
so when you distill a model is like a set of weights with a particular sort of pattern of neurons.
yeah, there's a neural network that has been formed, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So distillation means using that network to do inferences and then do something else, or is it literally just extracting these weights and doing something with it, or is it starting from these weights and sort of further training that network, which I think is the fine tuning bit?
So it is starting with the weights and then basically fine tuning down to something that is normally smaller. And so one of the things I've been working on is something called small language models, distillation from larger models. And so the idea is ChatGPT or Llama or any of these other things typically are pretty good at a lot of tasks. So the thing I've been playing with just to learn is, if I take a YouTube title, can I categorize it? So given some random YouTube title, can I come out with a good category for that YouTube title? And ChatGPT and Llama and a lot of these other large language models, they do an okay job of it. The problem is that it takes a long time. Like the cost of the time cost and the actual energy cost in doing that inference, which is the actual inference is the operation that is like I'm asking you a question and then inference happens and it gives me an answer. They're really good and they take a while. And so what you can do is you can actually distill a large language model into a smaller model. It only does that thing,
The
right?
question that I have is how do you do that if you don't have the weights? Because the OpenAI models, the weights are not publicly available. So how do you distill from that model? Because the
Well,
fine tuning, if fine tuning is the process of use this, you need the weights.
so I don't know the answer to that yet. This is still
Another
relatively new.
follow up item.
Yeah, we gotta figure out exactly what are the mechanisms. But what I can tell you is that you are generating weights and other things somehow using the larger model. And so ChatGPT, OpenAI has now come out screaming, they broke the rules. They used our model. Right?
No, yeah, there was a lot of interesting content on that. Tech
Which
bros complaining how bad it is to other people scrape their
To
stuff.
steal other people's work after they've trained these billion-dollar models on other people's work.
it's like the amount of hypocrisy was incredible.
It
But
was fascinating.
distillation had kind of been written off about 6 months ago, where people were saying, this may not be a way forward. And so the belief in Deepseek has not come out directly and said that they use ChatGPT to distill their model. But there have been points where DeepSeek R1 says, I am ChatGPT. Like,
Whoops.
what what are you? I am ChatGPT. It should be obvious. There's some screenshots floating around about that. So I mean, people have been able to more or less jailbreak this model to get it to divulge all the things it's not supposed to. However, there was an interesting new development though, and this is part of the reason that they were able to train on lower class hardware. And so first off, my grasp of all of these individual components is still a little nebulous, so you may need to like correct me if I misspeak. But DeepSeek is often cutting parts of the neural network off during execution. And so the an example that someone gave is, if you imagine that this neural network is the equivalent of 17 experts. When you ask the question of ChatGPT, all 17 experts get engaged in answering the question. So the answer you get is very high quality. But the problem is that you need boatloads of memory and boatloads of computing power to run the neural network that accounts for all 17 of these experts, right? DeepSeek does it differently. What it will do is it will say, I have 17 experts here. What is the fewest number I can answer this question with? And so all of a sudden, what will happen is DeepSeek, as opposed to using all 17 experts in the neural network to answer the question, will cut all of them away and only use two or three. The resource constraint, like the resources needed to do that are much lower. And so by shaving off all of these additional non-usable, well, non-necessary neural nets, DeepSeek is able to do inference and training at a lower cost on lower levels of hardware.
That gives us a really direct path to AGI, right? We can be almost equivalent to the humans by saying we're just going to ignore all the experts and just go with our gut. And
Yeah,
we don't any inference. We're just done here.
sure. 100%.
Let's talk about climate change. It doesn't exist.
All these experts say it's not real, man.
But being a bit more serious, perhaps to
Yeah.
my comment just now, I'm not super sold. I mean, it's interesting, right, that you can like take a model and just use less of it. But I think the problems that are more interesting to solve is how to make these better or cheaper. But like I'm not ready to go down on the quality thing because quality is still not good enough. So I'm okay with cheaper, but not cheaper and worse. Like I want, there's only specific directions on that trade-off curve that I want to move, and it wouldn't be down to the quality aspect of that. So I'm a little skeptical, and the versions of R1 that I've used so far have not impressed me. I'm trying to get an account on the full blown one and see if it can solve my wolf and sheep problem. But until it does that, I'm still kind of like, okay, that's interesting, but does it really change everything?
So you bring up a couple interesting points. Number one is if you're running these things locally, you're not running on the full set of weights. And so if you're running Olama or if you're running Deepseek locally, you're probably only running a few billion parameters. Whereas when you run these things on the larger like OpenAI or in DeepSeek's networks, you're often using hundreds of billions of parameters, and so the results from the bigger ones are just so you do have to do a comparison between apples and apples, right? You have to have DeepSeek running on DeepSeek servers compared to um, OpenAI's models running on OpenAI servers. And so that is but it is a really interesting question. Are the answers good? Thankfully, there is a gentleman who seems to have done some very interesting analysis. I found this article on Hugging Face. His name is Prativ Sakti. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And what he did was he threw the same tasks at O3 Mini and DeepSeek R1. And his takeaway, so like one of the things he did was he said, go build me the snake, right? And then he analyzed the code. And what he found is that DeepSeek, it works, but it's not scalable and it's not optimized.
The code
Whereas
is not scalable and optimized, or
it is,
DeepSeek is not scalable or optimized.
yeah, the code that DeepSeek R1 turned out is not scalable and it is not optimized. And by scalable, what he means is if you start blowing the board up bigger and bigger, the way that DeepSeek handles the board is pixel by pixel. And so you hit limitations pretty quick. With O3 Mini, there was a lot of isolation in terms of concerns. And the way that it handles the board itself, it makes it very, very, very scalable to the point where you could probably get a huge board and still be able to play the game. And I think that's kind of consistent throughout, where DeepSeek R1 is turning out good enough, and O3 Mini is turning out good.
Little extra irony in there that this is the year of the snake that just had
No.
New Year. So Chinese companies AI fails to solve a snake game.
That's that's real
That's
deep. You
that's
should seek out
crazy.
more. So, I mean, are you surprised by that?
Not really with my experience so far. My curiosity says, what would happen if you went to R1 and said, well, that doesn't scale. Could you make it scale? Well, like, would it solve it?
Yeah, it may be able to. These are, I don't know how many iterations he went with, if this was the first one versus, you know, the fourth iteration. I think when I think about a lot of this, though, I come back to you and I can look at that code and say, oh, that's like you're doing a recursive use of set interval in JavaScript, and this is not going to go well eventually, right? Um, but a normal person is not going to know that. And as a matter of fact, if you're not an expert, you're not even going to realize there's a difference. And so good enough for most people does not mean good. I think
Yeah.
is
So if you bring this back to how is AI going to replace AI, that doesn't bode too well yet. Right. And I say yet because, our lack of imagination on this podcast
well,
series is always going to be limiting to what happens in the future. So if you're listening to this 20 years from now, it's like, ha, yeah, we got that one solved. But it seems with what we know so far, there is some curation still necessary somewhere in the middle to
right.
guide these to the right spots.
I agree. But I just keep I keep coming back to, is this a bootstrapping thing where you bootstrap the first model, but now you've learned enough that you can bootstrap the second model off the first model and improve it. And then the next step, you bootstrap again and you go to an even better model. Like, is this going to become a bootstrapping thing where we begin, like, for instance, at the beginning of 2024, the idea of synthetic data was like, people were like, that's crazy. Like, there's no way that a computer, an AI can turn out a training set of data that is usable in training a better model, right? It was this idea that your training data can never be generated to be better than what it was trained on. And then sure enough, that is actually proven to be not true. And so nowadays it's just so much easier to take a sampling of some kind of data that you would like to more or less synthesize and have the model synthesize it for you. They're good enough that they're turning out really good training data.
Yeah, we're
And
gonna
so,
have to have a follow-up item on that because it sounds
yeah,
probably closer to how the extraction model extraction works, right? Using a model to generate some training data, then you train another
right.
model on, so you're benefiting from this model, but you didn't have access to the weights. You just had access to its inference.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. As part of this entire distillation process, oftentimes is synthetic data creation.
That's a scary thought. Interesting but scary, right? You take a model, you train it on average, you generate synthetic data, then use that to train more stuff on it.
Yeah.
If that actually works, it is very interesting of how the heck that actually works, right?
So in the categorization stuff I've been doing, I realized today actually that in order to do a good text classification training, so the idea is I've I have all these YouTube titles that I've synthetically generated. And then I've had the AI go through using GPT 4.0 and categorize each of them, right? But then I realized today that in order to train this thing effectively, I actually have to have similar sized buckets of categories to do the text classification training that I'm talking. And it's just a few sentences in the prompt to make it happen. Like, they don't have to be the exact same size. They gotta be close enough, right? And so, like, that's the crazy thing is these prompts that you put in, where the prompt that I was working with is in the paragraph, and I'm turning out, like, thousands of samples of data for this training set, which I can then turn around and go do the thing
Did
with.
you eyeball the training set though and make sure it doesn't look like rush hour? Because and is it the same stuff like over and over again? Because that would be hard for you to eyeball.
Well, that's the that's the other thing, is you can also build a checker to verify that your training set data has the right, it makes sense, that the data itself is different enough that you're not running into
And
issues.
generate this enough times until the checker says they're happy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, what a
Or
whole new world.
you can do something else, which is, let's say you know that a training data set needs to be, say, 5,000 rows, right, in a CSV. Generate 10,000 and then cherry pick what you want, right? So if you've
Yeah,
got
that's
10,
the same thing as running it twice and
yeah, I mean, yeah, running it
multiplicating
twice,
space.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's the thing, is in the process of building Deepseek R1, they were using the LLMs to build the training sets to build the LLMs. So there is a potential for a real bootstrap.
And it's also fascinating if you used our LLM to train your LLM. Well, if you paid us for using our LLM, then could we have a copyright claim or some kind of intellectual property rights claim on the thing? Because, like, surely the stuff, if I'm paying you ChatGPT, then everything that comes out is not yours, it's mine? Or is it
Really
someone's?
funny. You should say that, Thana. It's like when the thieves complain that they've been stolen from.
Not from that perspective, but like if I generate stuff from ChatGPT
Mhm.
and it was straight like a paragraph from ChatGPT, that's clearly not copyrightable by me. But if I then edit this paragraph a little bit, at some point of the editing, that becomes mine.
Mhm.
So and that's not like a black and white place. It's some
Right.
kind of gray thing. Did I contribute enough to it? But then same way, like if ChatGPT generated you a whole app for playing Rush Hour,
Mhm.
is that yours? Like how many files do you have to change to make it yours?
Well, I think you might be conflating patents and copyright in terms of protection here. And so the Supreme Court? There
Keep
was
this
a
to copyright because patents have like a whole different set of
Yeah,
criteria.
yeah. Well,
So
there's
forget patents.
I'll tell you why I was thinking patent. But the Supreme Court was either, I can't remember if it was the Supreme Court or a high court, basically just said purely generated content is not copyrightable. But if a human is part of that process, it is copyrightable. Caveat, this has not been litigated and nobody knows what the legal definition of human in the loop was in this instance. And so does that mean that, you like you were just saying, where you generate the paragraph and then you make enough changes that now it's copyrightable? That's
Yeah, and I find that unusual because courts will usually rule on very specific things. So it would be weird for them to make a broad statement like that. But that would be curious on how that plays out.
Mhm,
The whole intellectual property aspect of this, and maybe going a bit in a rabbit hole here, is quite
mhm.
fascinating because kind of on one hand, intellectual property rights have taken over the last, I don't know, 100 years, a complete turn from what they were maybe originally intended to. And, if I as a human like go and, experience life and my weights in my brain get tuned in a certain way, and then I output content and that is my creativity and that is copyrightable. It's mine now. It's my production. Yes, an AI can do this at much bigger scale, but it is essentially like it's not copying anything. It's very much reducing it using the same algorithms that we do, just at a much more massive scale.
Right.
So, thinking of, the companies that are suing, OpenAI for training on their data. Well, what exactly are they copying? And some interesting challenges, right? Because the scale is,
Yeah.
is completely different. So you may want to apply different rules because the sheer scale, but mechanistically, it's not the same thing at all.
Yeah, I mean, my personal belief is that OpenAI and all these LLM creators have, in some way, shape, or form, stolen a lot of things. Just in terms of, and you're starting to see it where like newspapers are suing the OpenAI because OpenAI very obviously trained on their
That's
data.
my intuition as well, but I have trouble backing it up when I go with facts, right? Because like if I read an article off the New York Times and then read an article off the Washington Post and then write an essay about that topic, how is that different than the AI having trained on the same two articles and then writing an article based on that topic? Seems to me to be the same thing, other than the AI
because
does it at a scale.
because your use is covered under fair use, and I don't know that OpenAI's use is covered under fair use. So, and now keep in mind, I am not a copyright lawyer, nor do I believe you are.
We just play one
But
on a podcast.
yeah, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night.
No one
So
gets that reference other than us two.
yeah, we're old. No, so actually Nilay Patel always says this, and it is true, is that the only true way to regulate the internet is with copyright, and that any other form of regulation has failed woefully. And so Deeps or OpenAI and probably a lot of the other LLM creators are in legal battles right now to deal with having more or less used copyrighted material. In some instances, they have struck deals and licensing deals and other stuff. I don't know if it's retroactively or not. There is a legal risk that they have put themselves under. And also, these companies have more money than God. And so they can afford to just litigate it until it goes away. And so you're not going to see a reckoning for these companies, I don't think. Like what they've done may very well have been beyond the pale. but also they have enough money that everybody's going to eventually settle.
Yeah, I think the how this is going to play in real life is a different angle that might change what we think of like fair outcomes and whatnot. I'm still struggling with the idea that I'm covered by fair use, right? Because I read like a lot of stuff. I go to some trainings. I live through life, and my weights in my brain just get adjusted.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel that is copyright. Like copyright is very specific in you wrote this thing. You can't write something that's substantially the same and make a profit out of it.
You can't
This
be
is
it.
not. Yeah, may not copy this thing, but like if you're training a
Right.
model, you're not copying. You're kind of just
Well,
slightly updating certain probabilities in your mind as to certain things coming before or after certain other things. And that is a completely different creative process than I took this and copied it and pretended it was mine and sold
well,
it.
are you talking about with regards to DeepSeek? Or are you talking about or OpenAI trading? I'm so sorry.
It probably applies to both.
For OpenAI, I think it is like they literally ingested articles and pictures and things like that, and they use those to develop something else. If it is not covered by fair use, then yeah, they infringed copyright.
This could get extremely technical, right? Because
Yeah,
when I download an article from New York Times,
right.
I'm making a local cache copy on my
That
computer
is
in the form of HTML, and then I'm making like a representation in graphics in my GPU and on my monitor. Is that copying? If you probably take the letter of the law, it is.
no,
Um,
it's not actually, because the courts this was litigated. This aspect of what you're talking about is
okay,
litigated
because if that
because
part isn't, then that's all they need to do to get OpenAI needs to get a copy of that temporarily, train some weights, and throw it away. So it's not like they made that copy and sold it. So if
that's
if you don't violate them for bringing a local copy temporarily somewhere for training, I have trouble seeing how the next part that comes after that of their slight adjustments of weights based on one's article falls under copyright.
if we were to brand our podcast Mickey Mouse's podcast on Will AI Snap That? Disney is going to have something to say about that. We're going to have infringed a copyright. So we didn't copy anything directly from Disney, but we copied the idea. And, this, look, I do know that there was a litigation and that basically early on with computers and the internet, where a judge finally decided that making a digital copy does not fall afoul of copyright. But there was because like the entire idea of copyright is about literally producing a copy.
Well, that must have some constraints, right? Because I could, if you have a PDF that's copyrighted, I can't go keep giving it to different people, even though it's digital. That still violates copyright.
Well, but if it's within your internal computer system, and I mean, you know how this works. When you open a
Right. If
document,
I copy paste
eight
a file from
copies
here
that are
there,
making,
that's
yeah,
surely
all over the place. And so making those 8 copies within the internal system do not fall afoul of copy. But I don't know. Maybe what we need to do is get a copyright lawyer to come on.
yeah. And I'm wondering also I think if we called the podcast the Mickey Mouse something or another, then that may be more trademarky than copyrighty. Because like it's
It
not
is, yeah, but it is also, you will believe me, when Disney comes after you about using Mickey Mouse, they come after you with copyright. They don't come after you with trademark.
yeah, I'd be curious how that would work if it was in a title, because like the amount of copying, like what
Yeah.
exactly? Yeah, I don't know.
There is, all right. So there's a band. I can't believe I'm going here. There's a band that my sons and I love. It's called Ice Nine Kills, and they sing about horror. Okay. And their music is really, really good, but it's also violent because the material that they sing about is like, the shower scene in what's it, the Psych,
Psycho.
right? Or they sing about Jaws and all that. Anyways, love music, not for everybody. They have managed to produce a bunch of t-shirts that have Mickey Mouse holding a bloody axe on the front of the t-shirt. And to this day, I cannot figure out how they have not been sued out of existence.
One of the earlier versions of Mickey Mouse has been out of copyright, but it's only that
Maybe,
version. So it's like a black and white, like 1916 Mickey Mouse, but the 1917 is still under copyright or something.
yeah, maybe this looked like it's an older, but not
There's some
super old
exceptions
Mickey
for
Mouse.
parodies and things like that, but I don't know how much
Maybe
you
it's
can get away with it
parody.
if you're selling like, thousands of these t-shirts or whatever.
Yeah, dude, I don't know, but a lot of that came about because they were disallowed. They were touring with a couple different bands, and they Ice Nine Kills specifically was not allowed to perform at Disney Springs or whatever it is in
Shocking.
Orlando. But the band they were touring with was like Flair or Lamb of God. I don't remember who it was, but like this band is not family friendly,
Yeah.
right? But because they did not actively engage in like violent iconography, they were allowed to perform. Ice Nine Kills. Apparently, it was a whole deal. So, and that's where the T-shirt came from. They were like, "F this."
That's wild.
Yeah, and if you wear one of their shirts to Disney, you will be asked to turn it inside out, or asked
What
to
if
leave
it's the
the park.
same both sides? Because that's what I would do.
Then you will be asked to leave the park. So, anyways, so here we are. Anything else you want to talk about before we get into the better part of the show?
No, let's roll.
So, I will now inform everybody of the scale that changes regularly. So, the scale that we have is 0 to 4. There shall not be a -1, as you pointed out last time. The scale is 0 to 4. 0 being there is no
0 to
impact.
4 or 1 to 4? There's a 0 new now.
Oh, 1 to 4. You're right. 1 to 4. 0 is what I tried to
Try to
introduce.
squeak it in, Michael.
Yeah, my bad. My bad. So, yes, 1 to 4. Thank you for clarifying. Typically, we would say that a 1 is no impact on jobs and a 4 is 50% job loss. But I don't think we can take that here because we're talking about two different AIs or a group
Maybe
of
I'll leave you have the 0 just for this time.
I don't think we can do 0. So in this instance, I think we need to talk about whether or not AI can advance the field of AI. Okay. So 0 is there is no advancement whatsoever. Or sorry, 1 is there is no advancement whatsoever, that you cannot use an AI to improve the field of AIs. Okay. 2 is there's a little bit that you can do. 3 is, yeah, actually, there's a whole lot that you can do. And 4 is absolutely you will be replacing generations of AI with AI and it will happen quickly. So does that sound like a fair scale?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to encode 2.5.
All right. Give
I'm
me your you can't give it a 2.5 Thomas.
Well, I'm kind of in between, right? Because on one hand, where this could end up is you're training junk on junk and you get junk, so maybe it doesn't go anywhere. On the other hand, people are pretty smart and they'll figure out how to make use of it. So surely there's going to be some improvement, and because people are pretty creative, that could be huge. So then that's a 4. So we can average out and get a 3. I'm gonna. My gut feeling tells me this is closer to a 4 in that there people are pretty clever with how this works. And if you look at certain AIs where you can have like the trainer and the judge and
Mhm.
they can bootstrap each other without having anything, and you can get to something out of nothing, I think this probably falls in the same category.
Yeah.
So I think that's more likely than not to evolve where the impact is huge. And you start getting these positive feedback loops or
Flywheels.
flywheels going faster and faster. So I'm going to guess that the impact here is going to be big. This is likely to go somewhere.
Yeah. And I think the answer is 4. And I think that DeepSeek R1 is the first iteration. DeepSeek R1 was very obviously trained using ChatGPT. And as a result, DeepSeek R1 is good. And so I think that you are now going to turn around and see other people do the exact same thing. And here's the real interesting aspect of this, which is it makes me wonder if this is going to commoditize AI rapidly. Because right now, the idea that you or I could train something as competent as, say, GPT 4.0, ludicrous. Or it was up until a few weeks ago. Because, like, we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to run the training, right? We don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to run the inference. But now, all of a sudden, Deepseek comes out and they're like, yeah, we did it with low quality, low level hard, or with not as high quality hardware. And we did it for a fraction of the cost. And all of a sudden, you're looking at it going, oh, well, they just had a giant impact on the economics of this field because maybe AI quickly becomes a commodity and the iterations just speed up more and more. And we get AGI.
I ponder, though, in all of this, why does NVIDIA go down? Because if anything, they're going to be selling more of these cards.
Because the stock market is a measure of human emotion. It is not a measure of dollars.
Yeah, but like usually with these advances, you don't do less of it. You just end up doing more of it because
Yeah.
holy crap, now I can train this with even more and more and more stuff. So I need more of these cards.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, well, ChatGPT, OpenAI has access to their own model. And if DeepSeek could train DeepSeek R1 on their model without having access, just using the prompts or APIs or something, then I'm pretty sure that OpenAI can do it on their own model. And DeepSeek did it on hardware that's not as good as what OpenAI has. They can do it faster. So I
And
think
they don't
this
have to pay the tariffs to buy these graphics
nailed
cards.
it. Yeah. This can be a tariff on bits at some point, but that's yeah. So I think we're both on the same page here. You're gonna start seeing pretty big iterations on these models very quickly where they're just gonna build off of each other. And I don't know if there's some limit that they'll hit eventually. I have no idea. I don't currently see that there is, but I'm also not what I would call a large language model generation expert. So
Interesting times ahead.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, and the humans of Earth, I am Michael Rollins. My co host Thanos has come with you, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your days before the Overlords take over, and you will be beholden to them.
thank you, Thomas. I hope you have a great rest of your
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to go enjoy some pineapple and caviar.
day. Get it.